There's a continent whose surface we've essentially never seen. It's larger than Europa. It lies on Earth, reachable within a day, and 98% of its actual surface is hidden beneath a layer of ice nearly 5 kilometers thick. This is Antarctica, the only continent that humanity discovered later than it was conceived. And to this day, it's the only place on the planet whose terrain we know less about than that of other planets. Today, we'll explore what lies beneath this ice, where it came from, why a continent now at minus 89 degrees was once covered in tropical forest, and what questions science still can't answer about it. Let's start with the strangest fact in the history of geography. Antarctica was depicted on maps long before anyone had ever laid eyes on it. Even ancient geographers reasoned that if there was so much land in the northern hemisphere, there must be a counterweight in the south. Otherwise, the planet would tip over. The logic was flawed, but the conclusion was correct. 16th century maps depicted a huge continent at the bottom labeled Unknown Southern Land. Its outlines were drawn by hand. Generations of explorers set out to search for the land that had been drawn for reasons of symmetry. In the 1770s, James Cook was the first to cross the Antarctic Circle and circumnavigate the supposed continent. He saw nothing but ice and wrote in his report that if a southern land existed, it lay beyond a belt of impassable ice, was of no use, and had no purpose for man. This conclusion discouraged the search for a continent for almost half a century. Cook was one of history's greatest navigators, and here he was mistaken. Land was there, just a few hundred kilometers from the point where he turned back. The mainland was sighted in January 1820. A Russian expedition under the command of Bellingshausen and Lazarev on the sloops Vostok and Mirny approached a solid wall of ice that stretched along the horizon and resembled no iceberg. Bellingshausen recorded what he saw in his diary, not fully understanding what he saw. Before him was the edge of a continental ice sheet. A few days later, a British expedition approached the shores from the other side, and a few months later, an American expedition. The three countries still debate priority. But more importantly, the continent, whose existence had been suspected for 2,000 years, was the last to be discovered. Then come the statistics, which are hard to believe. Antarctica covers an area of approximately 14 million square kilometers. That's 1.5 times the size of Australia. Its ice sheet contains approximately 90% of the planet's ice and about 70% of all fresh water. The average ice thickness is over 2 kilometers, with a maximum of almost 4,800 meters. Because of this, Antarctica is the highest continent. Its average surface elevation is twice that of Asia, although almost all of this height is frozen water. This is the coldest place on the planet. The absolute record was recorded at the Soviet Vostok station in July 1983, minus 89.2 degrees Celsius. Later, satellite measurements of the snow surface temperature on high mountain domes yielded even lower readings, around minus 98 degrees Celsius. At such temperatures, ordinary steel becomes as brittle as glass, and a deep breath can burn your lungs. And it's also the driest place on the planet. There's a region here called the Dry Valleys, several dozen kilometers of rocky desert, free of ice. Not because it's warm there, but because the wind blows away the snow faster than it can settle. Geologists estimate that some parts of these valleys haven't seen rain in 2 million years. Precipitation there is less than in the Sahara. The conditions are so similar to those on Mars that space agency engineers test prototype rovers there. The wind here is also unique. It's called a katabatic wind. Heavy, cold air rolls down the central dome toward the coast under its own weight, accelerating down the slope. In some coastal areas, its speed reaches up to 300 kilometers per hour. This wind blows not because of a cyclone, but simply because the continent is dome-shaped, and cold air is heavier than warm air. It blows almost constantly, for years, in the same direction. But all this is just the surface. The real fun begins below. As early as the 1950s, working with seismic and gravimetric data, Soviet researchers discovered something unexpected beneath the central part of the shield: mountains. Not just isolated peaks, but a full-fledged mountain system stretching for over 1,000 kilometers, comparable to the Alps in area and height. They named it the Gombortsev Mountains. And here's the key detail. No one has ever seen them, ever. They're completely buried beneath several kilometers of ice. Their very existence is a mystery. Mountains are subject to erosion. Wind, water, and temperature fluctuations wear away any ridge over tens of millions of years unless it's supported by tectonics. The Gamburtsev Mountains are very old. Tectonic activity has long ceased, and by all calculations, they should have become a plain long before the ice covered them. Instead, they have sharp peaks and deep valleys, the topography of young mountains.
One theory is that the ice not only concealed them, but also preserved them, while the river valleys were carved out before the glaciation and have remained unchanged since. It's a compelling hypothesis, but there's no definitive answer. Hidden beneath the ice shield is something you'd never expect from an icy continent: volcanoes. On the coast of the Ross Sea stands Mount Erebus, one of the few volcanoes on the planet with a permanent lava lake in its crater. Molten rock has been sloshing there continuously for decades while steam rises from cracks in the glacier around it, freezing hollow ice towers as tall as a man in the cold. But Erebus is visible. Far more interesting is what's hidden. Analysis of the terrain beneath the western part of the shield has revealed more than 100 cones resembling volcanic ones, almost all of them previously unknown. This makes the region one of the largest volcanic provinces on Earth. No one knows exactly how active they are, and that's no idle question. Heat from below melts the ice and lubricates its slide toward the ocean. Radar sounding, when an aircraft flies over the shield and illuminates it with radio waves, gradually mapped what lay below, and the picture turned out to be nothing like a flat plate. Deep depressions, canyons, and entire basins below sea level were discovered beneath the ice. The Denman Glacier region contains the deepest point on land. The canyon floor is approximately 3.5 kilometers below sea level. By comparison, the bottom of the Dead Sea, the lowest point on open land, is just over 400 meters, a difference of almost 9 times. There's also water beneath the glacier, lots of it. Heat from the Earth's interior and the enormous pressure of the overlying ice cause the ice at its base to melt. This water collects in depressions in the terrain and forms lakes. The first of these was discovered beneath the Vostok station, and it turned out to be gigantic. Approximately 250 kilometers long, 50 kilometers wide, with depths of up to 800 meters. It's one of the largest lakes on the planet by volume, and it's topped by almost 4 kilometers of ice. Then they found more, and more. Today, more than 400 subglacial lakes are known, and some catalogs put the number closer to 700. They are connected by channels. An entire hydrological network exists beneath the ice sheet, rivers flowing in the darkness under pressure of hundreds of atmospheres. Sometimes, one lake discharges water into another, causing the ice surface above it to sink several meters. Satellites record these subsidences, and from them scientists calculate exactly where, beneath kilometers of ice, an underground flood occurred. The main question was obvious. Was there life there? Lake Vostok has been isolated from the atmosphere for, according to various estimates, anywhere from several 100,000 to 15 million years. It's not just a dark lake, it's a hermetically sealed ecosystem, cut off from the rest of the world. Russian glaciologists drilled a borehole into it for several decades, and in 2012, the drill finally reached the water's surface. The work was meticulous. They had to ensure that nothing from the surface was introduced into the lake. Otherwise, the scientific value of the results would be lost forever. Traces of microorganisms were discovered in samples of frozen lake ice. Some of the findings are still disputed. Some are real, some were introduced by drilling fluid. But independent confirmation came from the other side of the continent. An American team drilled a hole into the small subglacial Lake Whillans and recovered clear water samples. They revealed a living, active microbial ecosystem. Thousands of species of bacteria that survive without sunlight, extracting energy from the minerals in the rock. A completely autonomous biosphere beneath 4 kilometers of ice. And in 2021, something happened that biologists still can't clearly explain. British geologists were drilling into an ice shelf to collect a core sample. The borehole penetrated 900 meters of ice. The camera sank to the bottom, and instead of the expected silt, they found a rock to which sponges and other immobile filter-feeding organisms were attached. Alive. 260 kilometers from the nearest open water in complete darkness at temperatures near freezing. What they feed on and how they got there is unknown.
It was a chance find. The likelihood of hitting such a rock with a drill is vanishingly small. There's also a place on this continent that looks downright implausible. A stream of bright red liquid flows from the Taylor Glacier in the dry valleys. It's called Blood Falls. Discoverers in the early 20th century assumed the color was due to red algae. In reality, it's brine, several times saltier than seawater, saturated with iron. Upon exiting, the iron comes into contact with air, oxidizes, and the water literally rusts before your eyes. The source of the brine has been trapped beneath the glacier for approximately 1.5 to 2 million years. Microbes have also been found there, surviving without light or oxygen, generating energy through reactions with iron and sulfur. Meteorites are a separate topic. Antarctica has proven to be the best place on Earth to find them, and for a completely unobvious reason. A rock that falls in a forest or desert gets lost among other rocks. Here, any dark fragment against a white background can be seen from a kilometer away. Moreover, the ice acts like a conveyor belt. It slowly flows from the center to the coast, and where mountain ranges block the way, the flow encounters them, rises, and evaporates under the sun and wind, leaving behind everything it carried. Such places are called blue ice fields, and meteorites simply lie there, collected by nature over tens of thousands of years. More meteorites have been recovered from Antarctica than from the rest of the planet combined, tens of thousands of samples. Among them are pieces of the Moon and Mars, dislodged from these celestial bodies by asteroid impacts. One Martian meteorite found in the Allen Hills caused a worldwide sensation in the 1990s. Structures resembling fossilized bacteria were discovered within it. For several years, science debated whether extraterrestrial life had been discovered. Today, most researchers believe these structures are non-biological in origin. But it was precisely this debate that largely gave birth to modern astrobiology as a discipline. However, Antarctica's greatest scientific value isn't the rocks, but the ice itself. It's formed from snow that never melted. Each year, a new layer is deposited, compressing the previous one, and air bubbles are trapped within the ice along with the snow. This isn't a reconstruction or a model. They're literally samples of the ancient atmosphere, preserved and delivered to us intact. By drilling a hole and recovering a core, we can open a bubble and directly measure what the planet's air was like hundreds of thousands of years ago. Cores from the Vostok station provided a continuous record for approximately 420,000 years. A European project on a dome deep in the continent extended this to 800,000 years. All of modern paleoclimatology grew out of these data. We saw the alternation of ice ages and interglacials, observed how the composition of the atmosphere changed, and were able to correlate them with each other. Drilling is currently underway, targeting ice more than 1 million years old. Scientists want to understand why the rhythm of glacial cycles changed dramatically around that time. The answer likely lies in these bubbles. And here we come to the main paradox. The same ice that preserves the history of cold lies atop evidence that the continent was once green. In the 20th century, fossilized tree trunks, leaf imprints, and coal seams were discovered in Antarctic rocks. Coal is the compressed remains of vegetation, and it lies here in entire layers. This means that forests once stood in the place of the icy desert, dense enough and long enough to form industrial-sized deposits. Bones confirm the same. In the 1990s, in the Trans-Antarctic Mountains, at an altitude of over 4 kilometers, accessible only by helicopter, the remains of a large predatory dinosaur with an unusual transverse crest on its head were discovered. Nearby lay a herbivorous contemporary. The age was approximately 190 million years. At the opposite end of the continent on the islands off the Antarctic Peninsula, an armored ankylosaur was found, along with small, fast herbivores related to Velociraptor. Plesiosaurs and mosasaurs were found in coastal sediments. A complete ecosystem, land and sea. The most compelling evidence was recovered from the bottom of the Amundsen Sea in 2020. A drilling platform recovered a core sample containing a layer completely unlike any other. A dense network of fossilized roots, pollen, spores, and traces of soil. The core was approximately 90 million years old, located at approximately 82 degrees south latitude, almost at the pole. A reconstruction revealed an average annual temperature of about 12 degrees Celsius and a temperate rainforest similar to the forests of New Zealand today, right at the pole. A few years later, Antarctic amber, the hardened resin of conifers that grew here 90 million years ago, was recovered from the same area. Meanwhile, the polar night never went away, rose above the horizon. How an entire forest of dinosaurs could have survived in such darkness is a question that has lingered for decades. It was long believed that the animals migrated toward the equator. Then, in polar sediments in the northern hemisphere, the bones of newborns were found, creatures that were physically incapable of traveling thousands of kilometers. This means they didn't migrate. This means they hibernated. Some polar dinosaurs have been found to have enlarged eye sockets and enlarged visual regions of the brain, an adaptation to life in the dark, like modern nocturnal animals. The warmth was maintained by the greenhouse effect. Carbon dioxide levels in the Cretaceous atmosphere were several times higher than today. There was no ice on the planet, and sea levels were tens of meters higher than today. Then a decline began. Volcanic activity subsided, and uplifted mountain ranges exposed vast areas of fresh rock, which, as it weathered, chemically bound carbon dioxide and trapped it in minerals. The planet began to cool, slowly, over tens of millions of years. But it wasn't chemistry, but geography that delivered the final verdict on the continent. Antarctica drifted south and steadily lost contact with its neighbors. About 34 million years ago, the last land bridge, the one connecting it with South America, split apart. A strait opened between the continents, now known as the Drake Passage, 800 kilometers of the stormiest water on the planet. And at that moment, something happened that changed the entire Earth's climate. Previously, warm currents from the equator reached the southern shores unimpeded, warming the continent like a heating system. Now, for the first time in history, a closed, ring-shaped corridor has appeared around Antarctica, and within it, the Antarctic Circumpolar Current, the most powerful current on the planet, carrying more water than all the Earth's rivers combined, has spun. It has locked the continent in a ring of cold water, cutting it off from warmth. The continent has become thermally isolated. Then a mechanism was activated that could no longer be stopped. The snow stopped melting over the summer. Ice appeared. Ice is a white surface. A white surface reflects sunlight back into space. Reflection means cooling. Cooling means even more ice. This feedback loop is called glacial albedo, and it feeds on itself. Once it started, the continent was doomed. In geological terms, it froze rapidly in a matter of a few 100,000 years. It's worth making a disclaimer here, as the scientific debate isn't over. For a long time, the opening of the Drake Passage was considered the primary, if not the sole, cause of glaciation. Now, many researchers are inclined to believe that the decisive factor was, in fact, a drop in carbon dioxide concentrations below a certain threshold, with ocean currents merely intensifying and perpetuating the process. Estimates of the opening of the strait are also still being refined. The discrepancies between estimates reach tens of millions of years. This is a normal situation for science. The overall picture is clear, but the weights of individual factors are still being weighed. What Antarctica lacks deserves special mention. There is not a single permanent resident. There is no indigenous population, no cities, no land ownership. A treaty signed in 1959 froze all territorial claims, banned military activity, and declared the continent a zone open to science. A protocol was later added banning any mineral extraction. Its terms may not be revised until the second half of this century. An entire continent that belongs to no one is a historically almost unique phenomenon. There are no land vertebrates here either. Penguins and seals feed at sea and only venture onto land. The continent's largest land animal is a wingless midge, about 6 millimeters long. It spends most of its life frozen, losing up to 70% of its body water, and revives when the temperature rises above freezing. On a continent where herds of dinosaurs once grazed, the largest permanent land animal fits on a fingernail. But here lives a bird that breeds at the most inopportune time of year possible. Emperor penguins lay a single egg at the beginning of winter, when temperatures drop below -50 degrees Celsius, and the sun doesn't shine for weeks. The female goes 100 kilometers out to sea to feed, while the male remains standing on the ice with the egg on his feet, not eating for 2 months straight. To stay warm, thousands of males huddle together in a tight group and slowly rotate. Those on the outside gradually move inward, while those warmed up make way for them at the edge. Inside such a colony, the temperature rises to plus 20 degrees Celsius. This isn't instinctive self-sacrifice, but a precise evolutionary calculation. The chick must hatch precisely when the spring plankton enters the sea. Incidentally, it was in Antarctica that one of the most serious environmental problems of the 20th century was discovered. In the 1980s, British observers noticed that ozone levels above their station dropped to abnormally low levels in the spring. The data was so unusual that they were initially attributed to instrument malfunction. Satellites, it later turned out, had also recorded the anomaly, but their software automatically rejected these readings as erroneous. Thus, the ozone hole was discovered, and this is perhaps the only instance in which the world reached an agreement and resolved a global environmental problem in a matter of years. Naturally, an entire mythology industry has grown up around such a continent. Medieval maps supposedly depicting the coastline beneath the ice, secret bases, entrances to the underworld, anomalies in satellite images. Every investigation yields the same results.